Hey, this is Mike Lindsay from Vital MX, and welcome back to another in-depth race bike feature. This week's episode, we have Vince Friese's 2022 Smartop Bullfrog Spas MotoConcepts Honda CRF250R. The team, though, has been around for quite a few years now. I think we have passed the decade point with the MotoConcepts team. And with that, they've raced the 250 class before. They've been out of it for quite a while, but they are back this year with Vince Friese racing the West Coast and Mitchell Oldenburg racing the same bike come the East region. So we're going to dive into this thing. In the first place we're going to start is what everybody would probably consider the most important of the 250 class, the engine. Their engine duties are handled by Chad Braun from XPR Motorsports, and he's been doing it for the team for, I think, 8 years now, coming up somewhere between that 8 and 10 year mark. Not the whole time the team's been around, but pretty darn close. The program's pretty unique. The team itself does not have to have anybody on staff to assemble or build engines. All the engines just get rotated to Chad and his staff. He is located in Murrieta, California, one of the top engine builders in the country. So everything goes through him. It's all service, all built, all dynoed, etc. in-house. And with that, he takes what is the stock 250 engine, does quite a bit of modifications to it. Everything from doing a special tumbling and treatment to the transmissions. The cranks are sent out for a certain process, uses a different rod, albeit we believe that the rod length in this engine is stock. It's just an aftermarket rod that is tougher and able to put up with the abuse and heat that is run through these engines. The piston is a design by Chad himself. He does work very closely with CP pistons, but the piston that is in this bike, in the MotoConcepts 450, all that is designed by him and only available by reaching out to him directly. That also goes for the valve spec in the bike and the valve springs. And then the head work is done in-house by Chad. It's his porting spec. Adds the valve seats. For some bikes, adds putty basically in the head ports. We're not 100% sure on this bike if that's what is done. And at the moment, we believe the bike is actually on a stock cam profile. Being that the 2022 CRF250R had a huge valve train overhaul this year, all guys are kind of starting from stock when it comes to the valve train parts and particularly the cam. For now, Chad's been able to optimize the stock cam layout, and I believe that is what they are currently running in the race bike. Other than that, it does have a Recluse torque drive clutch in it, a full complete clutch from the inner hub pressure plate and their torque drive clutch pack. But this clutch is not technically available to the public at the moment. It is a development piece, and it's actually based off of the outgoing CRF250R clutch, and Chad has done some modifications to make it fit in this bike as they develop the new clutch with Recluse for this specific application. Other than that, something that has really caught news in the last week or two is a few of the top teams adding electric water pumps to their 250s. We did talk to Chad very briefly for another video that you can find on our YouTube channel on why these are being brought into the 250 class. With this, they have been able to apply one of these electric water pumps to Vince's bike, and there are multiple reasons for this. And talking to Chad, the main reason for him was heat related. As you build a lot of power on these 250Fs, the heat becomes a bigger issue, and also the rate that the riders ride them. They're much harder on the bikes, much more clutch abuse. The motors tend to run hotter, and when they run hotter, they are less efficient. So the original idea behind testing this water pump was to regulate the temperatures better, but in turn, it also has boosted horsepower and changed a little bit of engine character. Talking about why the power has increased, it's a combination of friction and resistance being taken away from the engine. The stock water pump, you have the impeller that is inside the water pump housing that is sloshing through the water and is creating resistance, which goes down a shaft, through some seals, through some O-rings, which also create friction and resistance, onto a gear that has to be driven by the engine. By going to the external electric water pump, you can remove all the mechanical parts from the motor and block off the area. So the engine itself is no longer having to give up some of its power to run the water system in the bike. This increases overall horsepower and torque, and it also frees up the engine because, once again, it's not having to turn over another part, so it makes the bikes feel more responsive. The RPM rate build is a little bit different, somewhat similar to a flywheel, but without giving up other integral parts of inertia that the engine needs to have good overall character. The electronics on this bike are fairly stock. They start with a stock harness and just clear up a few things for water resistance, for durability reasons. And then the ECUs are done by Chad. It is a Vortex ECU, which is custom mapped, spends hours and hours on the dyno to build out maps that work with this engine package, with the fuel they run, which we believe they run the VP Pro 6 blend at the moment. That's what the team has been partnered with for quite a few years. And with this pretty much ties up the majority of Chad's involvement with the bike. As far as we are aware, the throttle body is standard, and the airbox and velocity stack we believe is on this bike. But most notably, on the left side of the bike, the lower side panel that kind of acts as a cover piece for the airbox opening has actually been removed for Supercross, just leaving a nice open void for the bike to draw in air. This probably would not stick if this bike was being raced outdoors for debris reasons, but for Supercross, with as little time as the guys spent on the track and the cleanness of the material and the conditions, they're able to get away with really exposing the filter element to just a lot more air volume. From the chassis standpoint, the frame on this bike, of course, is stock. We do not believe, like many other factory teams, that they have gone through the effort of gusseting or trying to brace any certain areas on the frame. We believe this is off the showroom floor as is, along with the swing arm. Albeit there are some engine mounts on the bike, a new design from Scott at Works Chassis Lab. The upper mount it looks really thin, but it's actually made of a thicker material. We are not sure actually off the top of our head if this is aluminum, steel, or titanium. We're leaning a little bit towards it might be steel by the look of the material. And the front engine mount is titanium. This changes the overall flex characteristic between the front headstay, the main spars, and the engine to give Vince a certain feel he's looking for. They're probably looking for a little bit more front end grip, a little bit more stiffness in the front cradle into the headstay, while trying to get the spars to just relax a little bit more so the bike tracks a bit better off acceleration chop and has better roll character. The suspension duties are handled in-house by Showa. The MCR team does have a lease program with Showa where they have their own technician that is assigned to them. They service it, build it all, and test it with them. This is Showa's A-Kit suspension that's available for the CRF250R. With Vince's bike, it is the 250 class. There's nothing really unique beyond what the public can buy that you're allowed to run due to homologation reasons. So while yes, the suspension on this bike is quite trick, it is also available to anybody that wants to go out and purchase it. The bike is outfitted with unbranded X-Trick Rocks triplet clamps. We believe these to be the standard 22mm offset, as this red tech clamp, that's the only offset it actually comes in. We did notice a minor spacer under the bar mounts. Vince likes his bars just a little bit taller up. Vince is not a tall guy by any means, but he's not as short as many others in the 250 class. The foot pegs and foot peg brackets on this bike are all titanium, but these are not the HRC parts. These are actually purchasable through MotoConcepts. They made these for the team. The bike also does use a lot of other commonplace parts that we see throughout the pits. They are on a support deal with Dunlop, so their riders do have access to spec tires and other unique choices that most of the high-end factory teams have. DID rims laced up to kite hubs, along with a standard DID ER T3 chain. As been known in the past, that MotoConcepts has actually ran a road race-based chain on their 450s due to the load and torque that the 450s output, but the 250 is still within a range that they use a consumer-based motocross chain on this bike. All the hardware on this bike, or at least the majority of it, is standard steel hardware from your axles, swing arm pivots, engine mount points. We have noticed on a few of their bikes, sometimes they will run a little bit of titanium on your plastic bolts, which these are areas that do not affect usually the flex characteristic of the bike, but they're able to trim just a little bit of weight. Overall, the MCR team, again, is a privately owned team, but they do not spare expense when needed. The bike is definitely reasonable, being that basically everything on this bike can be purchased by the public, but at the same time, they go through and really figure out where their money is best spent. And based on what we saw at A1, Vince did pull 2 hole shots on the bike. It's definitely plenty competitive, and really was proved is that any of these private entities can produce a package that can run at the front of the field in Supercross. Based on the performance we saw at A1, Vince Friese was able to get back-to-back hole shots on this bike against the Star Racing, PC, Factory Honda, all the best equipment on the line. So clearly shows that between his wrench, Nick McCampbell, Tony Alessi, the team manager, the whole MotoConcepts crew, and Chad Braun, they have proven that yes, private teams can race with the biggest and the best funded when it comes to Supercross. Again, this bike, in a sense, has no expense spared. Everything that's truly important to go racing has been examined, and they have figured out, really what do we need. But at the same time, there's not a lot of waste on this motorcycle. You don't see a lot of data collection items. You just don't see a lot of things that really are maybe unnecessary for a small crew to go racing. And a huge respect and hats off to these guys for building this bike. If you want to check out more of these in-depth bike features, make sure you subscribe to our channel here at Vinyl MX on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up, all the goodies, so you see more of these videos. You can also go to our website at vinylmx.com, where we do a lot of other tech features. Particularly what we're famous for is Pit Bits. It's a weekly feature we do every race day during Supercross and outdoor season, where we go through and find out what these bikes, what the guys have changed, what's new for helmets and gear and stuff like that, because Even though we shot this video early in the season, almost any of these bikes, by the end of the season, teams will introduce new parts and new cool goodies, and you can go there to find out what is the latest and greatest. We hope you guys enjoyed. We have plenty more factory bikes, satellite bikes, support bikes, and even some privateer bikes coming down the pipeline for in-depth.